Bible this morning to the book of Matthew chapter 9, the Gospel of Matthew chapter 9. Of course, we know that there are four Gospels in the Bible, and that those four Gospels give us the good news, the message of the Lord Jesus Christ, and each of those from a different perspective. And many of those accounts can be found in all four. I want to read you an account this morning, something on my heart. It's a very short account of one that Matthew tells us about. Matthew chapter 9, we're going to begin again reading in verse 27, and we'll read down through this account. It goes down through verse 31. Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 27. And when Jesus departed thence, two blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he was come into the house, the blind men came to him. And Jesus saith unto them, Believe ye that I am able to do this? They said unto him, Yea, Lord. Then touched he their eyes, saying, According to your faith, be it unto you. And their eyes were opened, and Jesus straitly charged them, saying, See that no man know it. But they, when they were departed, spread abroad his fame in all that country. And that's reading down through verse 31. Now, if we were to go back in this chapter, this is a chapter that's jam-packed full of the works of the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm not going to go back through all of those with you this morning, but immediately preceding what I read to you is the account, a very familiar account, and I'll be honest with you, one of my favorite accounts in the Gospels, of a time when a man would come to Jesus and that he would tell him that his 12-year-old daughter was at home sick and she was at the point of death, and that he would come and he would ask Jesus if he would come and heal her. And on his way there, that there was a woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years, and that she had heard of Jesus. And she had tried everything that she knew, and that she heard that Jesus had all that he had done, and she would come and touch the hem of his garment, and she would be made whole of her condition. And then, evidently, immediately after, of course, that after Jesus would heal that woman, that he'd go into Jairus' house, and that Jairus' daughter had died, and that was no problem for the Lord. He not only has power over sickness, he has power over death, and that he would raise her from the dead. And that account ended in verse 26, saying that his fame went abroad in all that land because of the fact that he had raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. And we go immediately into verse 27, and it seems to me, by the way that it's written here, that this happened just after that Jesus left the house of Jairus. And it speaks of two men that would follow him, and that they would cry out for him to have mercy on them. And then that Jesus would go into the house, and that they would come and they'd follow him. And he'd ask some questions, and that Jesus would heal them. And that's the account that we read there in verses 27 to 31. But I'm going to look just this morning just at that account, just at these blind men. And those are the characters that are given to us in this account, were two blind men. And I don't know all about them, but blindness was common in that part of the world in that day. And I'm not going to take a lot of time with this, but I do want us to at least get our minds going in that direction, that there are various reasons why that blindness was a scourge in that part of the world in that day. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they lived in an area that the sun was bright, and they lived in an area where it could be dusty at times, and no doubt that maybe there could be flies and insects and those sorts of things that would prey on a person if his eyes maybe would become infected by those things. And so a lot of different reasons why that people were blind. 5 times alone in Matthew's Gospel, 5 different times that we read of blind people that came to Jesus. 5 different accounts in his Gospel alone of those that would come to Jesus. And of course, Jesus would have the power to heal them. You can go back to the Old Testament And you could find that blindness was common in the Old Testament. And several different ones came to my mind. I preached about, I think last Sunday morning, about dealing with things and how Jacob came to the place that he had to deal with this issue between him and his brother. But what was it that caused, and I understand it was not the Lord's will for Esau to get the blessing, but why was it that Isaac was confused about his sons? He was blind, wasn't he? The Bible says that he was old and his eyes had grown dim and he could not see. And Jacob took advantage of that, of his blindness, and that he would go in and that he would, remember, he'd put the skins on his arms, and that he would wear the clothes that smelled like a field, and that he knew that his father was going to have to rely on another sense besides his eyes to figure out who it was, because that he was blind. The Bible says, whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Jacob also was blind in his old age. You realize that? Let me remind you of an account. You remember when Joseph's sons came to be blessed? And that Jacob would bring them in unto him, that he would give the blessing to the younger one. And that Joseph would try to take those sons and switch them around so that the older would get the blessing and not the younger. And Brother Adrian, basically Jacob just told him, I know what I'm doing. He was blind. He could not see. We go on and read the Old Testament. Do you remember the time when Samuel would be brought up at the temple or the tabernacle, and he would be brought up there with Eli, the high priest? And they would go into battle against the Philistines. And it said that Eli would sit on a seat by the road, and it made this statement about him, that Eli was old and his eyes were dim, that he could not see. So that many, even the Old Testament days, suffered from blindness. It said this about Moses. Moses was 120 years when he died. And there's a statement there about Moses. It said that his natural force was not abated. And what else did it say about him? His eyes were not dim. Why did it say that? Because that was unusual, wasn't it? It was unusual for a person to live to that age and that day, and for them to still have a good eyesight. Even the law, you can go back and read, I believe it's in the book of Leviticus, that the Bible places a curse upon those that would take the blind and would lead them out of the way. In other words, cursed would be those who would try to take advantage of those who would be blind. Y'all know glasses didn't come around till the 1300s? And you probably wouldn't have wanted those glasses in the 1300s. They've been improved upon a lot today. I tell you what, this LASIK surgery that they have, that's amazing, isn't it? It's great. Thank the Lord for it. You know, that people who've not been able to see, maybe for many, we've got a missionary, I won't call his name, but we've got an interstate missionary that for years and years he was legally blind. And his wife had to do all the driving for him. He just had to have, Bible and boxcar letters to read it. And he had that surgery done, and he can read a normal Bible now. He can drive, do all those things, and that's great. We're blessed today to live in a time when our medical technology has come to the place where it is. And I know still some, as they grow older, that there's certain eye conditions the doctors can't do anything about, but most of those things, they can at least maybe stop the rapid progression of it. So nevertheless, these two men were blind, and I don't know the circumstances surrounding their blindness. They seemed to be in pretty good health. I don't believe they were blind because they were old. I don't know if they were born blind, or maybe they had some sort of disease that caused them to go blind. We don't know that. No need to speculate on it. But for some reason, they were together, weren't they? There were two blind men that were together. And I don't believe that they were in some kind of immoral relationship. I don't believe that's the case at all. The Bible doesn't say that. And I think you'd be wrong to even consider that. So don't think about it that way this morning. And I think it was more like this, that they had something in common, didn't they? Both of them were blind. And we naturally flock to those who have things in common with us. And so that these two men were together. And it may be that they begged together. I thought about that. Maybe they begged at the same place and they begged together. That's how they were able to make a living in that day, was to beg. The Bible talks about two blind people being together, doesn't it? It says if the blind lead the blind, what happens? So they both fall into the ditch. So whereas maybe it's good to have some company, maybe good to have some friendship there, companionship, that they weren't much help for one another because they were both blind. But this morning I want to take a few things. I believe there's some aspects here that we see in this account that form a beautiful picture of salvation. And not just of the body. These men were healed in the body. I believe there's a wonderful picture here of the healing of the soul that's needed. And that's what's on my heart this morning for just a few minutes, is I want to look at some aspects of this particular account of Scripture and try to make application. If you'd be here this morning and you'd be unsaved, I trust it could be a blessing to you. And you could even leave here today having trusted the Lord Jesus as your Savior. The first thing that I want us to see in this account of Scripture here in Matthew chapter 9 is that these men were aware of their blindness. These men were aware of their blindness. Let me ask you this question. Can a person be blind and not be aware of their blindness? Be careful how you answer. Can a person be blind and be unaware of their blindness? I think I've shared this with you before, but several years ago there was an explosion in a mine in the state of West Virginia. And the miners were trapped down there underground. And they were trapped for several days. And they were able to go in eventually. They were able to drill through that area where it caved in on them. And they were able to get to them. And the first thing that they sent to them was food and water and a light. And those men had been down there for several days. I don't know the exact number of days, but they had been down there for several days. And they had been in complete darkness. And when they finally rode a bore through to them, and they sent the food in, and they sent the light in, that one of the men asked the question. He said, "Why don't they give us a light?" And the other men, their mouths fell open. They said, "There is a light." You get the picture here? That man had been blinded in the explosion. But he did not know he was blind. Until when? Until the light shone in. And when the light shone in, it revealed to him that he was blind. Totally unaware, blind, completely blind, couldn't see a thing, but was totally unaware of it until that he was exposed to the light. Now let me ask you another question this morning. Can a person be lost and not know it? Can a person be lost and not know it? I'm not going to just answer that question with a yes or no. I'm going to answer it like this. The Bible says that nobody will stand before God in judgment and have an excuse as to why that they failed to receive Jesus as their Savior. So we know that. Everyone will have the opportunity to be saved. However, the Bible says this, that it is Satan's goal to blind the minds of those that believe not. And I'm going to turn over and read that in the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And I want you to listen to what Paul said here concerning what Satan desires to do to those who are lost. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, beginning in verse 3. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. beginning in verse 3. Satan desires to keep you in the dark. Just as that man who was blind, as long as he was in the dark, he didn't know he was blind. So that's where Satan wants you. He wants you to be in the dark. He doesn't want the light to shine unto you. He doesn't want you to be exposed to your situation. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, in verse 3. He said, but if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost. So our gospel doesn't need to be hid. He's committed it to us. It's our gospel, not the gospel of us, not what we've done, but what Christ has done. He said, if our gospel be hid, it's hid to them that are lost. Let's read on, verse 4. In whom, it's talking about the lost, in whom the God of this world, that's Satan, hath blinded the minds of them which believe not. That doesn't mean they've never been exposed to the light. They have. But it just simply means that because of their rejection, that Satan has blinded them to their condition. He's got them in the dark. He hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. So how does a lost person become aware that he's lost? He said the light shines unto them. For we preach not ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your servants for Jesus' sake. For God who commanded the light to shine out of darkness. We've been studying about that in Genesis, haven't we? That darkness was on the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. He commanded the light to shine forth out of darkness. He did that in creation. He said He's also done that today. And He does that today. He hath shined in our hearts. For what purpose? To give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So Paul said here that what Satan's goal is to keep you blinded, keep you in the dark. But what God desires to do is He desires to shine the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. To shine forth Christ and His righteousness and His love, His death, His burial, and His resurrection. He desires to shine that forth in your life, in your heart. To shine that light unto you. So let's go back to the example I used just a minute ago of those men that were in that mine. How was that man made aware of his blindness? The light was shown. How are these two men that we read about in Matthew chapter 9, we're going to go back to them in just a minute, how did they know they were blind? There was a time they didn't know they were blind. You know, when they came in, I'm just going to make an assumption here. Let's say they were born blind. They didn't know for a time they were blind, didn't know any difference. How did they find out they were blind? Somebody told them that you should be able to see. Your eyes should function. And they came to the knowledge that they were blind. So that exposure to the light let them know that there was a problem that they couldn't see. Let me read you another verse of Scripture in the book of 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 1. 2 Peter chapter 1 in verse 19. Paul said this concerning the Bible: we have a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto you do well that you take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place, until the day dawn and the day star arise in your hearts. Lost sinner, listen to me this morning. What's the light that shines in your heart? It's the Word of God. And that's what Peter said here. Peter had been up on the mountain with the Lord. He had seen Him. He had seen Him transfigured before his eyes. But he said, we've got a more sure word of prophecy. He said, you need to take heed to it. Because he said, it's as a light that shineth in a dark place. And what is the purpose of that? He said that the day would dawn and the day star would arise in your hearts. Christ is that day star. It's Him that needs to arise in your heart as you see yourself lost, you see yourself undone, you see yourself blind, you see yourself separated, and you see, he said, the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ, as you see Jesus Christ revealed unto you. You can go back in the book of Romans. I'm going to turn over there, but I think you could probably quote them. In the book of Romans chapter 3, verse 23, the Bible says that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Let me read that to you again. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All. Put your name there. You have sinned. You have come short of the glory of God. You say, well, I don't like that. Well, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. You have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And Satan would desire to blind you to that fact. He would desire to keep you in the dark. But the Bible here, remember, it's that sure word of prophecy that shines among us that we just read in 2 Peter chapter 1. And so that God's telling you, you have sinned and come short of the glory of God. You've missed the mark. Yes, you. Say, preacher, who are you talking to this morning? I'm talking to everybody that sits in the house. You have sinned and come short of the glory of God. He goes on in chapter 6, in verse 23, he says, for the wages of sin is death. What does it matter that I've sinned? Well, the soul that sinneth shall die. So the wages of sin is death. So that's the result of my sin. I'm going to die. I'm going to die physically. But if you're lost, you're dead spiritually, and you're going to die eternally if you don't do anything about it. There's 3 deaths. There's physical death, there's spiritual death, and there's eternal death. So the wages of sin is death. And if you fail to do anything about your situation, if you just remain in that blind condition, you're going to experience all 3. But the good news is, he said, the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ, our Lord. So there's hope. There's a way out. There's deliverance. There's salvation. So first thing we see here is these men were aware of their blindness. They knew that they were blind. Now, I'm going to go back to Matthew chapter 9. The second thing that I want us to look at is in verse 27 and 28. It said, when Jesus departed thence, 2 blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he was come into the house, the blind men came to him. You may have missed something here. When did these men see Jesus? Read it to you again, verse 27. And when Jesus departed thence, remember he's leaving Jairus' house. He walks out of the house and he walks into the street, and there's a multitude of people there. But it said this, that when he departed thence, when he left that house, when he went back out in the street, 2 blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. Get this picture in your mind this morning. I'm trying to make a point with this. Jesus is walking along the street, and there's 2 blind men behind him. And I don't know if somebody's leading them. I don't know if they're just listening and they hear the crowd. But they're hollering, Jesus, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. Jesus, Thou Son of David, have mercy on us. And what does Jesus do? He just keeps walking. Doesn't sound right, does it? But he just keep walking. But he did. And where'd he go? Verse 28 tells us that he went into a house. He just acted like he didn't hear them. He went on in the house. And I don't know if the door was shut behind him. I don't know. But he went into the house. But the statement's made that when he was coming to the house, the blind men came to him. So they began to cry while he's out in the street. But he goes on as if he doesn't hear him and goes into the house. And they had to enter into the house, didn't they? You see that? They had to come into the house. They had to come into the house. So the question that I want to ask you is this: how bad did they want to be healed? What did it mean to them to be able to get their sight back? Because Jesus just kept walking and went in the house. Were they welcome in the house? I don't know. Jesus welcomed them to the house. I don't know whose house it was. But they went into the house. That lets me know something. At that point in their life, that was the most important thing in the world to them, wasn't it? And they didn't care whose house it was. And they didn't care whether they were welcome there or not. And they didn't care what people would say. And they didn't care. I don't think they were trespassing. If you look at the culture in that day, that if a rabbi came, people were welcome to come in. But if they did charge them with trespassing, I don't think they cared at that point. Above everything else in this world, they wanted to be healed. And it didn't matter to them what the owner of the house thought. It didn't matter to them what anybody else thought. They saw their opportunity to be healed. And so the second thing that I want to mention to you this morning, first of all, they were aware of their blindness. And number two, you see the desperation of their cry. You see that? They were desperate, weren't they? They were desperate. Preacher, you mean to tell me that God's not going to save somebody who's not desperate? That's exactly what I'm telling you. God's not going to save anybody who's not desperate. Does that mean I have to wait to my deathbed? No. It just means this. Jeremiah chapter 29, in verse 13. Listen to the words of God that He spoke to the prophet Jeremiah. He said, "And ye shall seek me and find me when you shall search for me." How? With all your heart. He didn't say you'll seek me and you'll find me when you want me a little bit. But He said, when you search for me with all your heart, when your condition becomes the most important thing in the world to you, He said, that's when you'll find me. How important is salvation to you this morning? Is peace with God more important to you right now than anything else in the world? Is it more important to you than school? Is it more important to you than college? Is it more important to you than hobbies? Is it more important to you than everything else? He said, you'll find me when you search for me with all your heart. I thought about that man. You remember the man at the pool of Bethesda that had been laying there for 38 years? Jesus came there. He asked him, wilt thou be made whole? That man said, well, sir, I have no man when the waters are troubled to put me in the pool. He said, when the angel comes down, that somebody else gets in before I do, and I miss out. He said, I don't have anybody. But Jesus asked him, do you want to be made whole? Now you think about that. The Bible says at a certain season, the angel came and troubled the waters. Brother Johnny, it said at a certain season. Evidently they knew what that certain season was. I don't know as if those people hung around that pool all year. They would come there at that certain season because that's when the angel came. And what do we read there, Brother Johnny? We read that that place was full of people. Evidently it was that certain season, wasn't it? Evidently it was about the time, any time it could happen. And what did it take for that man to receive his healing? He'd been lame for 38 years. He had been laying, it said, in a long time in that place. And it does, I went back and read it this morning. It just doesn't say this, and I'm not trying to add to the Scriptures. But I believe that man there, that lame man at the pool, I believe he's right on the edge of the water. He's watching it. As soon as I see it agitate, I'm getting in. I believe Jesus came up behind him. I don't believe Jesus got down in the water and said, "Woo, look at me," while you're looking at the water. I believe Jesus came up behind him and said, "Sir, do you want to be made whole?" I believe that man had to turn his attention off the water and look at Jesus. He had to come to the place where I'm not worried about the water being troubled anymore. I'm going to focus on Him because He can heal me. And I believe at that point that it was the most important thing in the world for that man, for him to put his eyes on Jesus so he could receive his healing. Let me ask you, those of you that are saved here this morning, when you got saved, was that the most important thing in the world to you at that point? Did anything else matter? Nothing mattered, did it? It was me and the Lord. It was me and my eternity. It was me and death. It was me and hell. I don't know what else was going on in the world, but I knew I had to do something about this thing. Those men didn't care. And I think that's what Jesus was doing by going into the house. He wanted to be sure that above everything else in the world, that those men wanted their healing. So they came. They came with desperation. Y'all all saw the pictures. Heard about it a few weeks ago and trying to get people out of Afghanistan. The people that held onto the plane as it was taking off. That's desperation, isn't it? That is utter desperation. As far as they were concerned, nothing else matters. I've got to get out of here. And they didn't make it. Every one of them died. But that's what it means to be desperate. It means to put your faith completely in something or someone else. They were desperate. The third thing, I want to use this to be the last thing. It says, and when he was coming to the house, verse 28, the blind men came to him. And Jesus saith unto them, believe ye that I am able to do this? They say unto him, yea, Lord. Then touched he their eyes, saying, according to your faith, be it unto you. The third aspect of this is the condition of their healing. The condition of their healing. You saw they were aware of their situation. You saw they were desperate for healing. And so everything is there. There's a healer there. There's people who are blind. He has the power to heal. But there's one conditional here. And he asked him a question. He said, do you believe that I'm able to do this? Do you believe with all your heart that I am able to do this? What does God require? It's one word. It's faith, isn't it? Do you believe? The Bible uses faith at times. It uses believe at times. It's the same thing. Jesus said, do you believe that I'm able to do this? Is there a doubt in your mind that I'm able to heal you? Or do you fully believe that I have the power over your condition? I am able to heal you. Do you believe I'm able to do this? Look at the last two words in verse 28. They say unto him, yea, Lord. Jesus looked at those two men and he said, men, you've asked me to have mercy on you. Do you believe I can heal you? And they looked at him and they said, yes, we believe. There's no doubt in our minds we believe you can heal us. what made them believe that Jesus could heal them? What had Jesus just done? He had just raised a 12-year-old girl from the dead. What had Jesus just done? He had just healed a woman who had been infirmed with an issue of blood for 12 years. This whole chapter tells you about healing after healing after healing. Those men had heard. They couldn't see, but they had heard. And how does faith come? Faith comes by hearing, doesn't it? They had heard what Jesus had done for others, and there was no doubt in their mind that He can do it for us. And so Jesus said, do you believe I can heal you? They said, yes, Lord. And notice Jesus' response in verse 29. He touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, be it unto you. You can know you're lost. You can be at a place of desperation. But the only way that you're going to receive healing is for you to trust Him with all your heart. With all your heart. Can you trust God? Is God trustworthy? Is He trustworthy? You know, when I was a kid, I trusted my parents. If my mama or my daddy told me they were going to do something, they would do it. And if they couldn't do it, they would tell me, look, something's just beyond my power, I can't do it. I would trust them. If they told me something, that was the gospel truth. How much more God? He's promised that whosoever believeth in Jesus shall not perish but have everlasting life. Over and over again, whosoever believeth, whosoever believeth. If you'll believe, by grace that we're saved through faith, not saved through anything, but we're saved through faith. Jesus said, do you believe? He said, it's up to you. I'm ready to heal you. I got the power to heal you. But do you believe? They said, we believe. And He said, oh, according to your faith, because that you have faith, He said, I'm going to heal you. I want to read 2 verses in the book of John, chapter 20. There's so many, I just went over and over in my mind about what verses to read. There's so many that talk about faith. But these verses I got settled on. I'm going to read 2 verses. John chapter 20. And it's the last 2 verses in the chapter. And here John just simply tells us why he penned the gospel account that he penned. John chapter 20, verse 30. And many other signs truly did Jesus in their presence, in the presence of His disciples, which are not written in this book. But listen, lost sinner, listen to this very carefully. But these are written. John is simply saying this. There's a lot of things I didn't write down. He said, all the books in the world wouldn't contain the things that Jesus did. But He said, these things are written. I wrote down what I wrote for this purpose, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ. He said, it's the gospel, it's the good news of Jesus. He said, all these things I have written unto you, that Jesus, as He was born of a virgin, as He lived a perfect life, as He fulfilled the law, as He went to the cross and died according to the Scriptures, that He was buried according to the Scriptures, and on the 3rd day He rose again according to the Scriptures. He said, I've written all these things to you, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And listen to this statement. And that believing you might have what? Life. Believing you might have life through His name. All of these things are written for one reason, so that you and I could be saved. So this morning, this question is still asked. Do you believe that I'm able to save you? God's asking that question this morning to you that are lost. Do you believe that I'm able to save you? And He's asking for this response. Yes, Lord. I believe it. He said, according to your faith, be it unto you. You want to be saved this morning? You want to leave with the burden gone, with this business fixed, not having to worry about it again? I remember that just as plain as day. That night I got saved, that thought that I'll never have to worry about this again. And listen, there's no greater peace in the world than that peace to know I'll never have to worry about this again. This is done. This is settled. And that can happen to you this morning. It can happen to you right now where you sit. If in your heart you'll simply say, yes, Lord, I believe. Yes, Lord, I believe. God said, I'll save you for Jesus' sake. Let's have a verse of a song this morning as the